Welcome back to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Joining me now is a candidate for the Democratic primary in Congressional District 27, the seat vacated by Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Mary Barzee Flores. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Do I have to call you Judge Flores, or how does that work?
No, please call me Mary.
So talk to me a little bit about your background. Introduce yourself to folks.
All right. My name is Mary Barzee Flores. I've lived in this district my entire life, District 27, my entire life. Raised my family here, put my kids through public school here. Worked in this district really almost my entire life. My first job was washing dishes at the Pizza Hut right on Lejeune Road on the way to the airport. Worked my way through high school, college, law school. And then served this community for the majority of my professional career. First as a public defender for 12 years. A
federal public defender.
Federal public defender, where I fought for my clients hard, who were facing the awesome power of the federal government. And then as a circuit court judge for over 8 years, where I really, truly believed it was my job to make sure that every person that came into my courtroom was treated fair and square, whether they were the defendant, the victim, the witness, whether they were black or white or rich or poor or gay or straight. So I'm running for Congress because I love this community and I'm committed to public service.
So let's talk a little bit about the more recent part of your resume, which was you had retired from the bench or stepped down from the bench to sort of, as you got kids, you needed to earn some money, so you joined a private law firm.
I did. And
in the course of while you were there, President Obama, then President Obama, put your name up for consideration for the federal bench, correct?
He did.
And what happened there?
President Obama nominated me to the federal bench, and that was one of the greatest honors of my life. And I was also honored to have the highest qualifications rating from the American Bar Association, the endorsement of the Hispanic Bar Association, scores of lawyers and bar leaders supporting me, both Democrats and Republicans, and the support of both Senators Nelson and Rubio.
Initially?
Initially. Rubio was for me before he was against me.
What he ended up doing, as I understand it, it's an arcane process known as a blue card. You put a blue card in on a nomination. If you're a senator from the state where that nominee is moving forward and you put a blue card forward, the nomination sort of gets put on hold. So Senator Rubio, put your nomination on hold after you had already gone into the process. Do you know why?
The process, as you described it, is a little bit different, but that's the gist of it. The hometown senators can block a nominee from going forward. And of course, I'm not the only person that this happened to. You know, petty partisan politics prevented Judge Garland's nomination from going forward, and there were a number of other Obama nominees that did not go forward. But the question, why did Rubio block me? I can't answer that for sure because I don't know what was in his heart of hearts. He cited my support for the ACLU and my support for Emily's List. And you know what? I don't walk back that at all, because I do believe in civil liberties and I do believe in a woman's right to choose. And in Congress, I'll fight for civil liberties and I'll fight for a woman's right to choose.
There was also a case where you, as an assistant public defender, you weren't the lead on the case, you were an attorney in the case, and the defendant in that case eventually later sort of filed a motion claiming that ineffective use of counsel or incompetent counsel. I don't know that it was even directed at you, but just sort of more the system, and that he cited that as well.
He may have. That had nothing to do with anything, I assure you. That case was tried close to 15 years ago, and as you said, I wasn't even lead counsel. I've been practicing law. I've been a barred lawyer in the state of Florida for 28 years, taking 8 years out of there for the bench. That's 20 years practicing law, representing clients to the best of my ability, every single one of them.
So I don't want to belabor, but the last point I just want to ask about is, so do you believe it was partisan politics? Do you believe that this was petty partisan politics on the part of Senator Rubio?
You know, he was running for president. at the time. And whether this was an appeal to some faction of his base or something else, really, I would be speculating, and I'm not going to do that.
So if you make it to Congress, Congress is a place of petty partisan politics. How do we get beyond that? Or can we?
I agree that in large part it is, and it seems to be getting worse and worse. But I would love to be having the chance to consider fixing that issue in one small part. It's dysfunctional. I'd like to be able to perhaps introduce some function to it. It's disordered, and I'd like the opportunity to perhaps introduce some order. Now, I know I would only be one of many, but I'm committed to the task and looking forward to the job.
So what do you see as the important issues in this campaign?
You know, for me, as a Congresswoman, what's important for me is going to be what's important for the constituents of my district. What I see right now as the most important issues are certainly health care. That's probably number one. Obamacare may have some problems. We ought to be thinking about how to fix the problems. Repealing is down the wrong road. The thought that we might have a bill pass, as has been attempted by the House and then the Senate, and then whatever this skinny thing was, the absurdity of it, that would rob tens of millions of people from in the United States of their health care, is an abomination. And of course, that's not the road we should be leading down. I do believe in a right to basic, affordable health care, and whichever path would lead to that is what we should be considering.
So I just want to be clear. You believe that health care is a right?
Basic health care is a right. I don't believe that Cadillac health care is a right, but basic health care is a right. Yes, I do believe that.
Do you believe in single payer? In other words, basically have the government provide insurance for everyone?
I know that that's one thought. There are plans out there people are discussing, sometimes referred to as Medicare for all, either an opportunity for everyone to either buy into Medicaid or into Medicare, or have a basic government-sponsored health care insurance program with sliding scales where deductibles and copays go up with income. I think there are lots of different things to consider. What we shouldn't be considering are huge cuts to Medicaid that service children, the disabled, our elderly in nursing homes. We shouldn't be considering cuts to women's health, depriving women of needed basic rudimentary health care. We shouldn't be considering any plan that would result in higher premiums to Americans, which both the House plan and the Senate plan would have resulted in. So I think there are lots of things we could be looking at. I'm sorry to say the Republicans aren't looking at any of the things that we should be looking at now, and they seem to be looking into the past for what was pre-Obamacare, which was no good.
So let's move on to another subject. Since you worked for a number of years as a judge, and before that a federal public defender, criminal justice reform. Is that an issue that's important to you?
It is.
Talk to me about what is wrong with our criminal justice system today.
Well, there's a lot that could be fixed, and the differences in the state system and the federal system are substantial. But I would say, for example, minimum mandatories are something that we should be moving away from rather than embracing again, like our Attorney General is doing. So Jeff Sessions is re-embracing failed policies from the old war on drugs, things that we know now from evidence-based studies did not work, do not work, and are no good for Americans. So minimum mandatories are something that we should look at seriously, and I'm generally opposed to. I think almost anything that binds the hands of good prosecutors and judges is something that should be frowned upon, and that's another area Jeff Sessions and I would part ways.
We have a couple minutes. Let's try to go through a couple of issues. I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm assuming you're pro-choice?
I am.
Your views on Cuba. Should the embargo be lifted?
You know, I think Cuba is a tricky situation. You know, Fidel is dead, but unfortunately, his cruel communist ways are not. And I don't think that going back to a policy that we had for 50 years and did no good for the Cuban Americans here or for the Cubans on the island of Cuba is the way to go.
So did you agree with President Obama's decision to open up to some extent relations with Cuba?
I think opening up to some extent relations with Cuba is a step in the right direction. Now, whether or not we should have or should in the future tie that opening to bettering the human rights situation on the island is something that I think we should seriously consider. Immigration.
Let's do, in the last minute, let's talk a little bit about immigration. Do you believe that the Dreamers should be allowed to stay?
I do. I come from a family of immigrants, as many Americans do, obviously. But my grandmother was put on a boat from Ireland at 17 to sail to the United States and never to see her family in Ireland again. My husband's family were immigrants from Mexico. We just were in Mexico less than a month ago to celebrate my mother-in-law's 90th birthday with 100 relatives. I baptized my children in a small town in northern Mexico, Suazua. His family immigrated from Mexico and settled in the Detroit area and in the Indiana and Illinois areas, worked in the steel mills. I am very pro-immigrant and pro-immigration reform, but I think we've got to do it gently.
Mary Barsley-Flores, I really appreciate you coming in. I'm sure we'll have more time to talk. It's going to be a long race, but it's going to be an interesting one for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll be right back.